Why does Roland Emmerich like blowing up the world so much?
I watched a Q&A with him, and the guy
Yeah.
was like, why do people watch disaster movies? And he had no answer.
That's good to know. Okay, my name is George, and with me is Chris, and today we are going over the recent movie Moonfall by Roland Emmerich.
I guess one thing we can say in this movie's favor is that like it is an independent movie. It's an indie blockbuster. It wasn't good, but that's a separate issue. So I was looking at his IMDb, and of course he kicked off a never-ending franchise in 1994 when he made Stargate. And I see an announced project for future years he is directing Stargate.
But is that going to be like a good recreation, or is that going to be like a Phantom Menace situation?
I'd say closer to the latter would be my guess, but I don't know. Going in, I'm apprehensive because I don't find Patrick Wilson very charming at all, and Halle Berry is very hit and miss. Then this immediate taste of their chemistry was not promising.
And then Halle Berry at the beginning here, I did not even recognize it was her. She looks very different.
Yeah, so the shuttle is hit by this giant swarm of CGI, and everything's torn apart and everything's flying around, and Patrick Wilson gets like whipped around in space, and like the shuttle is torn apart and he's like flying into this broken husk and stuff. And I just it started me off at a funny place because you were talking about how ridiculous the limo scenes get in 2012 and whatever, and I was like, yeah, 3 minutes in, like they've survived already like 10 certain death situations.
I mean, I do really love the imagery of like this thing drilling a deep straight hole into the moon.
I agree.
It's a cool visual imagery. Okay, so now we are a decade into the future, and Brian Harper, our main character, is kind of a disgraced astronaut because no one believes him, including NASA. You know, the organization famous for its refusal in believing in its astronauts and disinterest, clearly, in intelligent life elsewhere in the universe. You really missed who NASA is there, Roland Emmerich.
There's a stream throughout this movie of like the common man. There's a conspiracy theorist who no one listens to, who's proved right, of course. And yeah, it feels like an odd viewpoint to take. There's some rising suspense, like all the Roland Emmerich movies from Independence Day, Godzilla, Day After Tomorrow, whatever. They all start with this like Michael Crichton-y kind of different people in different parts of the world are all catching on to what's happening. I kind of just wanted them to get going. Obviously, it's, you know, the moon is gonna fall in this movie Moonfall, and like the pieces they're putting together are that the moon is gonna fall, so that wasn't, I don't know, like thrilling to watch. Yeah, Sam approaches Patrick Wilson and explains to him the moon is out of orbit.
Yes, which is something NASA already discovered
Which is,
as well.
yeah, very odd because NASA already knows that. And Sam is trying to get Patrick Wilson to go to NASA to tell them that. And Patrick Wilson says no. But there's no suspense in it because NASA also already knows that. They showed that to us before this scene. It just seems like a straightforward like screenwriting mistake to me.
And here's the other thing that I'm going to rant about. This kind of scene is usually the fat that can be trimmed from movies, which is the whole people don't listen, don't believe other people thing. And it goes on for way too long, and I hate it because it's not interesting and it's irritating. In this scenario, in this world where the moon is out of orbit, right? Thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of amateur astronomers around the planet who would be looking at the sky every night. And I would imagine lots of people would have noticed this by now. Not to mention other agencies in other countries would have also noticed this.
Yeah.
There's no reason whatsoever for Patrick Wilson's character, who
is a disgraced hero,
but still loved space, still loved everything about it, wouldn't also just go, yeah, I've noticed that too. Maybe I should listen to you.
Yeah, I guess I don't know, obviously, but I assume a few people track the orbit of the moon.
Looks like some idiot tried to outrun the cops.
Yeah, that idiot is your son.
So we reveal the son is now like a troubled teen because he's missing his fatherly influence, and we set up this kind of like macho father-son relationship that turns out to be the core of the movie, but we actually don't talk about it much other than this scene. But yeah, so we've got now like Patrick Wilson is like this like disgraced guy who's secretly honorable, and he spends his time like fixing up a muscle car in tight t-shirts, and then his son is like joyriding around, and he's kind of this scuzzy dirtbag because he lacks this strong father figure, and he's in trouble with the police.
Come to Tom Lopez Lexus, where you're not just a customer.
The stepfather, Michael Pena, who is just a Lexus commercial for the entire movie. He works in a Lexus dealership, and he has a full scene literally standing in front of like an actual ad for Lexus. Then there's just like gratuitous Lexus product placement throughout.
You can really see what paid for this movie.
Yeah. There's riots and looting, but it's attributed to the mounting moon terror.
Which is the most realistic part of the movie.
Absolutely, yeah.
We now know that this would absolutely happen.
As soon as Moon out of orbit. Yeah. Man, it seems like such a shame to go like loot when they're 3 weeks. Well, I guess I would loot. What would I loot? I don't know.
Oh yeah, that's a good question.
What would you do if you had 3 weeks till moon death?
Look, if the doomsday event is the moon falling on Earth, I wouldn't try to loot things to survive, because there would be no survival.
No.
I'd probably just do a lot of drugs. Why not?
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Yeah, I just do a lot of drugs, and I just look for a lot of world-ending orgies.
Yeah, which I think, again, so that's kind of an odd feature of this movie, is that they're like, the moon's falling, and we all gotta get to safety. And I was like, this is not gonna work out for you guys.
Okay, here's what we need to do. We need to send this video to Neil deGrasse Tyson and ask him, what would actually happen if the moon falls? He'll have a great rant about this, so it's gonna be interesting. I guess we'll see him on Joe Rogan or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we may have failed to adequately explain the moon's falling out of orbit. NASA knows, but the other half of the conspiracy theory is that Sam believes that the moon is falling out of orbit, and also that it's hollow, and that it's a mega structure. In other words, a built structure that is powered by, I've forgotten. It's powered by CGI and was built by something long ago.
Houston, we're experiencing some kind of malfunction. Houston, you copy?
Yeah, I don't know why they needed to send 3 astronauts. I guess just so that they can have like a death scene and then make it concrete. But it's like, you don't even need a telescope. We literally have commercial cameras with lenses that are powerful enough to see the surface of the moon.
Right.
You would see a gaping giant hole.
And that hole has been here for 10 years. Famously, people never look at the moon. Roland Emmerich trademark destruction sequence, which is a giant wave hitting the city. And yeah, pretty fucking cool. I thought it looked really cool.
I'll give the man credit. He knows how to do scale of destruction. He doesn't hold back. Because like, I feel like even this scene with like, the flooding, in any other movie, it would probably be like the climactic shot. He just does it like 20 to 30 minutes in.
So Patrick Wilson was disgraced because he was initially a hero because he landed their shuttle after it was struck 10 years ago, and he landed it without power, and so he was a hero. But then he was disgraced when an investigation found that it was human error that caused the crash, which is absurd. But anyway, Halle Berry now digs into the files and finds his helmet cam and discovers that he was telling the truth. It was not human error. It was giant nano monster.
And it turns out that Donald Sutherland's character has been assigned to like keep this whole thing secret since the 60s.
And he just like hangs out down here in the Stark room.
That's another logic hole I gotta poke at, which is why? But what's there to gain to hide this? There's no reason for anyone, for any government, for any agency, for any business to spend money and go out of their way and spend resource to hide a bunch of things if there's nothing to gain from it.
Yeah, I don't think everything Donald Sutherland says here makes no sense. I'm pretty sure. The last thing that Donald Sutherland says that also makes no sense, he explains that there's this thing called the Zulu X-Ray 7 or ZX7. And it's the one thing that could save them from the aliens, but they don't have it because the government cut the funding to the project. Which I think was a bad call.
One small step for man, one giant leap for yada, yada, yada.
There was only one word left. Yada, yada, yada is supposed to be shorter than what you're replacing with the yada, yada, yada.
Okay, so NASA is now having an argument with the military of the US, and it concludes with the generals saying this is a military issue now, whatever. And I just, again, I feel like in reality, it's all one government. It's all one country. Yeah. Who would actively choose to not have additional help and share the workload?
You're right. It seems, and it seems like Halle Berry is the only person at NASA, and then like these generals are the only other people in the government. Basically, is what it feels like. Especially because their plan is to nuke the moon. So
yeah,
like whatever anyone else does is not going to be relevant to them nuking the moon.
Halle Berry and all the NASA SWAT teams grabs these two characters, and Patrick Wilson actually asks, "What is this all about?" 44 minutes in, I was like, "What do you mean? Why would you even need to ask? What do you think this is about?"
I didn't catch that one. That's funny. There's a part later where Patrick Wilson like figures out that electronics attract the nanomonster, and so he like smashes them and saves them, and they don't get eaten. And then immediately after that, Halle Berry says to him, "It's the electronics that attract the nanomonster." And she's like explaining it to him, and I was like, I know! That's why he just broke the thing so the electronics wouldn't attract the nanomonster.
One of my favorite scenes, tiny little thing in The Martian, is when Matt Damon's character pulls out, like he just got an idea and he says hexadecimals, right?
Right.
And at that time, when I watched that movie for the first time, I didn't know what that was. And the movie didn't explain it to me. But the next thing that happens is it's like a montage of him like drawing out these lines in the sand.
Yeah.
And then like using the strings to like make this whole thing.
Yeah.
They didn't explain anything. I was looking at that and I can kind of get the idea going like, okay, this range is these letters and this range is these letters, and that's a code that you can then use to convert into messages. And that was sufficient.
Yes.
And that gave me the sense of like, this is how he's going to communicate. He's much smarter than me. And these people know these things that I've never even heard of, but it makes sense because they're NASA.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think I remember that part from The Martian. I haven't seen it since theater, but there were several things like that I remember where I was just like, oh, that's maybe how that works. Like I was in a process of that means you're in a process of discovery in the movie, which is fun and good and engaging. And so we get the scene where they say goodbye to their kids. And this channel is CineCringe, and this sequence is definitely the peak cringe of the entire movie for me.
Yeah.
When you're suddenly told an hour in by this sequence that you're supposed to be feeling like sappy and sentimental and attached to these people, it is very confusing. So they're like, okay, we're going to launch the rocket ourselves, and we have 28 minutes.
And their whole thing about why they send everybody home is because one of the engine went out, and they're like, okay, well, that's not enough for us to go to the moon.
Yeah, right. Oh yeah, and we forgot to like. Also, this sets up this perfect thing because Patrick Wilson is the only guy that's ever landed a shuttle with no power. So like this whole scenario also sets up to use his superpower again of doing things with no power.
And there's a great little scene where Sam Wilson goes like, "Fuck it, we don't need the countdown," and just like press a big red button and the rocket just ignites. I was like, that's not what the countdown is for.
Yeah. It's
not for you to get ready. There's like all kinds of mechanical things that are happening. Which reminds me, if you're interested in listening to the full-length discussion of this episode, you can find it on our Patreon. The link is on screen and in the description down below. If you go over there, you will get the entire recording in an audio format like a podcast. Check it out. Support us. Help us keep doing this. We really appreciate it. Anyways, this is the first shot that we saw the moon really close to Earth. And I love the shot of like the atmosphere being pulled onto the moon. That's pretty cool.
There are just shots like that are so fucking cool that I think I would have been satisfied seeing this in theater, even though the movie sucks. In that shot and in another shot soon, the moon like not only is looming over the Earth, but it like appears slowly from behind the Earth, like it's kind of like popping up like a horror movie villain. And it's like this very like nefarious evil moon is kind of like watching over you, like your Link running around. They show up, they're inside, they find the mega structure, the alien chases after them. They figure out that it eats power, so they have to sneak around with no power, except that they constantly use power still. Then they're grabbed by a tractor beam and saved from the alien by unknown forces. So here's the big second twist coming, is that the alien is not the only thing going on. There's some other entity on the moon.
It's basically Contact meets Prometheus, but shittier.
Contact meets Prometheus. That sounds really good.
Your ancestors were once a thriving civilization in a distant part of the galaxy.
Humanity is a species that's been around for millions of years, and we used to live in a different part of the galaxy, and we develop into like utopia through creation of like this AI that basically solves all problems and does everything for us. And then, like all AI movies, the AI inevitably turns bad, kills all humans. Humans decides decides to escape by creating moons in
Building
like various
moons,
parts of the galaxy so that we can like do the whole Prometheus thing. And this is the only one that survived. And Earth is the only planet, and we are the descendants of those ancestors.
I didn't expect this to happen. It's not a welcome choice, but
No.
it was a surprise left turn. I wasn't expecting things to go this way. This scene reveals that the entire movie is kind of built around the father-son relationship. And I say reveals because I honestly just didn't really know that, because so little time has been spent on them as characters. I really didn't care about the character side, and I really did care about the backstory, and I really just wanted him to like ask more questions about
The lore.
because the lore is really cool. The story is really cool. It's not this brilliant, unique idea or anything, but it's really fun, and like we don't get that many big sci-fi movies that have these epic like multi-million year story spans, and like I wanted more of that and less of the sun.
Okay, so there was a scene earlier where the Halle Berry's ex-husband refuses to launch the nuke to the last second, right? And he pulls out a gun, aims it at all the other general, and says, we have to give her a chance to try to save us. And the scene ends with him saying, "She's never let me down." And I was like, well, for one thing, she's your ex-wife.
Your ex-wife.
But also, then this scene happens where the cave that they're in crumbles and kills all of them. And I was like, basically, his ex-wife has let him down.
They detonate the ZX-7, they save everybody, the moon flies away, and despite having been essentially touching Earth, everything's just okay now because the moon flew away.
Yeah.
Again, like, huge chunks of the moon have smashed into the Earth all over for days, so I don't know why anyone's alive. As is becoming CineCringe tradition somehow, we get a teaser for a sequel. I think it's just a 5 out of 10 for me. It's bad. It's a bad movie. It's not good.
Yeah.
The characters are terrible. The story's dumb. Nothing makes any sense.
I agree with you that it's 50%. That's my score as well, because 50% of this movie is terribly boring whenever those fucking kids show up.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Next week, perfect timing is on April 19th, Blizzard's going to announce, I think, the next World of Warcraft expansion. So what we're going to do is we're going to revisit the Warcraft movie.
From Duncan Jones.
Yeah, from 2016 by Duncan Jones. Let's see how that held up.
I barely remember it, so this will be interesting for me. I mostly just remember orcs charging. That's kind of my...
That's basically all of Warcraft for 2 decades. But it's going to be an interesting one because you are somebody who knows almost nothing about the Warcraft universe, and World of Warcraft raised me into the adult that I am today.
You know a little about Warcraft, George?
Just a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's next week. Stay tuned for Warcraft the movie, and we are done today. Oh, and remember to like and subscribe and all of those things, and check out our Patreon. Okay, thank you very much. See you next time.
The moon must survive.